Okay, here it is, folks. Finally, the conclusion of our three-part series on the evolution of love. If you have somehow stumbled on this podcast and this is the first episode you're listening to, I strongly recommend that you go back and listen to parts 1 and 2, as this was an hour and a half long conversation Doug and I did at the International Enneagram Association Georgia chapter, and we broke it up into 3 parts. So this one will literally pick up right where we left off with part 2. Also, you might want to go back and reference the diagrams that were in the show notes of part 1 and 2. There is a PDF of the spiral dynamics and also one of the levels of health in the Enneagram. So in this one, Doug and I get a little more personal. I almost lose it at some point when I share about my friend who took her own life and how as a 7, I could not find any silver lining or reframe away what happened. So I actually came to understand during that process what depression was. And as a 7, that was very difficult to understand and deal with. So we talk about that. Also, one more thing, you may have to turn your volume up towards the end. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and Doug and I were the only ones with mics on. So it was kind of hard to hear them, but I do hope you'll turn them up because they were some really great questions. Okay, part 3 of the evolution of love.
Things also that you put me onto, which I will say, Danae has put me on to a lot of things. She said, you're in the thinking triad, right? You do a lot of reading, a lot of thinking. And so one of the things that I was not aware of was the Eckhart Tolle book on A New Earth. Well, I read New Earth, and one of the points that I picked up on that pertains to this conversation is Eckhart says you have to distinguish between identity and role and function.
Right.
So for example, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, that's a role and a function. That's not my identity. Mom, that's not an identity. If it is an identity, guess what happens when the empty nest shows up? If that's your identity, you got a real problem. And so then that gets into who am I? And so I've been on panels that include everything from spiritual leaders to atheists, and the conversation has to do with the way that we view ourselves as humans from the standpoint of being versus doing. Doing is all role and function stuff. Being is our innate identity as humans. Then the human value equation is we are all the same value. All the same. And our innate being is love. That's what I believe. And so if you say that your innate nature is love, that is your identity, love.
Right.
Now, if I'm doing what I understood you to just say with these points that Nan taught on and the I am statements, those are, you know, I may have a function as a 9 and you may function as a 7. But in that case, if I think instead of that being a role and function, that's my identity, then what ends up happening to get love is I do these certain things as a 9 in order to be love.
Right.
However, once you understand that you are love, then the 9ness and the 7ness and the 4ness comes from that. Your doing is a fruit. It is not something that you are doing in order to be loved. I hope that's making sense.
Does that make sense?
So you are a human being, not a human doing, if you've ever heard that discussion
of course.
or that conversation. So it is not something that you should take upon yourself to feel like, yeah, if I do this, if I accomplish this, then I can have love or be loved. Yeah.
The beauty of any growth path, be it worldview or the Enneagram, is the more you allow yourself to explore what's next, what more is there? What if? Those what if statements are great. What if I failed? Could I still be loved? Well, what more is there? That worked. And it's not a manipulation, but the more you evolve in your consciousness, in your health, the quicker it is for you to, when a circumstance comes into your life that causes you to regress, and that's what the fluidity that I was talking about, with worldviews, with our type, we can rise to our healthiest level, but sometimes things happen and we kind of go down in the levels. But the beauty is when you expand and rise up to, if you can get to your true essence and you do have this moment, it's quicker to come back up. Does that make sense? In your worldview. And I'll tell you, here's an example. We have all of these worldviews in us. We are every level, just like we are every type in the Enneagram. We have a home base, as we say, our center of gravity. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you, if the Ohio State Buckeyes are losing, this man will go archaic or warrior or whatever it is, quickly. Now, the solution to that is if I bring you some cake and he can breathe. That was mean. No, but that's the truth is we have all of these levels. We have all the 9 levels of our health within our type available to us. And so the more we expand these boundaries, the more we give ourselves the freedom to experience and question relationship, question the love. If I step back, am I going to fall? Right. I didn't fall.
Right.
And then
Can I dare expose this conversation when we sit and talk? Am I safe to talk to you about this?
And I can tell you, as a 7 who, I think I said this before, many years ago when I was in my 20s, mm-hmm. I was in a women's meeting, teaching thing. And this girl, it just shames me so bad. She said, I struggle with depression. And I literally said to her, well, just tell yourself you're happy and get over it. Well, that did not work well for me.
If it did, you would have been a heck of a thing.
I would have been.
You would have made a fortune.
So, I will tell you, when I experienced depression, I did not know what it was. I had a situation in my life that was absolutely devastating. A dear friend of mine took her own life. And my whole world mm-hmm. just shattered. Yeah. And I did not know how to come out of that for a long time. And I remember my mom saying, because you said to me, baby, you're depressed. And I was like, no, that's not who I am.
Right.
I always can find a silver lining. I can always turn this into a positive situation. Right. And I couldn't.
Yeah.
And the growth we had at that time
sure.
in exposing the vulnerable part of I can't fix this. Mm-hmm. It was so freeing, and I did not lose him because I wasn't fun those days.
No, and the power of that is just tremendous, and that kind of brings us to...
That was not in the script.
Right, that's probably the big takeaway. Right? Something that's not right. in the script.
But what we talk about is the only way to achieve this.
Yes,
communication.
And that is something that I will say, that of our... And I don't do this all the time, so relax. That of all of the things that make these tools work, it is that we are determined to communicate. From the time we married, someone suggested that you try to carve out time to sit and talk. So for us, we've been able to do this even when the kids were in the house, and they're long gone. We still do it to this day, and it's broadened. We get up every morning and have coffee, and we talk. Now we're able to, because of our schedule, we can sit and talk for an hour plus easily. And a matter of fact, it's generally, look, we need to get going, we need to go do things. And what's happened is we talk in the mornings. Some people may say, well, I can't do that. Well, other people may want to do it on a Saturday or a Sunday, but it's with frequency. It's that you're talking, you're communicating. That's the key to all these tools, is communication. So we will sit and we will talk, and does not allow an elephant to appear in the room.
Right.
Because look, we start talking, and if there's some little anxiety, something's going on that I didn't know about with one of the kids, or there's something going on that maybe has to do with me, although I sure don't know what that would be, or whatever it is. And you got to remember that a lot of times the other person could be wrong, you know. And so...
I don't know what you're talking about. That's cute.
So if you're talking and communicating, you have someone who wants this kind of communication. Wow, that's where the power of all this stuff has come in for us. And that is that we get in these discussions, and it's amazing how all of a sudden a spiral point or an Enneagram point comes into play, and I've never put that together before. And we're talking, and it's all like, oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So communications is a huge part of the evolution of our love,
Absolutely.
and I think everybody's love.
Because here's what I think we have a tendency to do sometimes, is especially in an intimate relationship, it can be in any relationship that's a long-term relationship. You kind of feel like, you know, we know each other, you know, we just kind of run on autopilot because I know you, you know me, and then that elephant shows up in the room and we're walking around it and things are getting worse. We're not mind readers.
Right.
We're not mind readers. They're not mind readers. And this reminds me, there was a song back in the 70s. Some of you are not going to know this at all, but a guy named Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song. Yay, old rock guys. Let's don't go down the rock. That's a whole. I can make a comparison with song all day long.
Which is another thing we share in common.
Oh, and we mess songs up on purpose.
We come out with
the new words. We're the Weird Al of.
Yeah. Exactly. Very entertaining.
The Gordon Lightfoot song was "If You Could Read My Mind, Love."
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I was looking it up because I remembered the song, and I was like, oh, I want to look at the lyrics, and I'm not going to sing it for you. Okay, come on, go aww.
Yeah.
Aww.
Maybe we should have an Enneagram karaoke.
Karaoke.
Night. Yes.
We have karaoke.
We pick out a song according to your number. And you have to sing the song that we pick for your number. Now, whatever.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. So anyway,
We're wrapping it up. I know,
Yeah.
it's been a long
Okay.
time. We're going to wrap it up here.
Right.
But I want to say, I looked this up, and he wrote this song in a response to his divorce. So, before you get to that stage, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you could read my mind, love, what a tale my thoughts would tell. And then go on down. He says, and if you read between the lines, you'd know that I'm just trying to understand the feelings that you lack. I never thought I could feel this way, and I've got to say that I just don't get it. I don't know where we went wrong, but the feeling's gone, and I just can't get it back. Well, I'm going to tell you one place he went wrong, or she went wrong, and that is the assumption that you can read my mind. You should know what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
If you love me,
Yes.
you will know what I'm thinking.
And I'm going to say that that's not a problem for any guy in this room to know that you can't read their mind. I don't think any of us. On the other hand, it's probably a little easier coming the other direction.
So, I know we've kind of gone on a little bit long. We got sidetracked a little. But what we want to say is knowledge without action
Yes.
just leads to nothing.
Right.
Leads to death and separation.
Yes.
The quickest way to kill a relationship is to cut off communication. It behooves all of us to take a look at our own life and how we are in our own healthy patterns. What behaviors do we have that are just habitual, that are not serving us anymore? And that's a real important phrase, is to say, I'm looking at what does not serve me. It's the same in worldviews. What old patterns of my worldview are not serving me? In our type, it's the same thing. What habitual patterns have I just gotten used to in my life that I take you for granted, that we take our friendships for granted, that we take for granted the way our children are supposed to behave, and we don't have the support system and the intentional conversation to allow both of us to grow in our levels of health and in our relationship.
And with regard to healthy, that's the whole point of evolution. What I consider healthy and unhealthy today is not at all what I considered healthy and unhealthy when I was in my 20s.
Right.
That is the point of the evolution of love. So one of the big words that you have, and we didn't put this in this script, that we have for each other is the word respect, right?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
big for us. And how you treat the other, what you say to the other, the kind of joking you do, what, you know, and what the boundaries of that are, because boundaries are used for health in a healthy way when you're doing that. But what I would have considered possibly respectful or disrespectful when I'm communicating with you 20 years ago, today I'm much more sensitive to, you know, I'm not going to say that because that really does not sound very respectful to Danae. That's just an example. That's showing that love is evolving. And that's the whole point of these tools, and why this is why you all are in here meeting all the time, is that you represent the hope of this planet, the people in this room. You represent the people on this planet that care and who want a better life and a better world. You're here for a reason on a weeknight that you didn't have to drive to get here. So that's really encouraging to me. That's what makes coming here and doing something like this such a cool treat.
So this is how we see the evolution of love. It begins with looking at yourself. You can't force love. I'm not going to sing. I don't have another song. But you can take care of yourself. And we are so thankful that we had this opportunity to be here with you guys tonight. I'm burning up.
and I will say real quickly, this is the Georgia chapter of the IAA,
yes.
right? Correct?
Yes.
Which I'm learning who everybody is. I'd like to personally, and you as well, say thank you to you all for that invitation, all of you who are involved in this. Also like to say thanks to Kevin Smith, who's become a real great friend and been out to our place now a couple times and shared some real in-depth conversation with us, which is that's what I do 24/7. I spend my life in these kinds of conversations. So
well, Kevin went to bat for us. I mean, we didn't.
Don't blame Kevin.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, if you got nothing from this, blame Kevin. It's
yes, exactly.
If you liked it, it was because we're just marvelous. But anyways, thank you.
Would you guys take questions?
We sure will.
Yes, but I have one I want
thing
you to
about
close
what
with
we
this.
talk about all
Yes,
the time,
all the-
and then we'll
it's
take
one
the
sentence,
questions.
we're done.
But the last point that we talk about all the time is any frustration we have about why anyone in our family or any of our friends don't seem to have an interest. This is really true. Probably we've had this discussion more about kids. You're always concerned about your kids. You want to have these kind of conversations with your kids. Maybe they're interested, maybe they don't care at all. But there is one thing that we talk about all the time, and that is, do you and I really want our kids to know the Enneagram and spiral dynamics, or do we want them to know love? And so we say to ourselves, whatever it is that today we want for this kid or that kid, let's you and me live it. Let's you and me live out and model what we would like for them to have in their own lives.
Yes.
And so then when you're modeling that love, when you're out there as a couple doing that on behalf of, it's a weird thing how vibrations happen and how we're connected in this world through these energy fields. It's amazing some of the things that you end up hearing from those kids when you're in those kinds of conversations.
And my challenge is to not go, that's what I told you 10 years ago. I'm the one who told you that.
Well,
no,
I will say this.
I'm just kidding.
Danae sat and talked to me about the Enneagram for some time, and what I noticed was the impact it was making in her life. I never one morning over coffee ever felt pressured to look into the Enneagram, even though she knows I study consciousness books and read consciousness books all the time. I did not jump right on the Enneagram, but I kept watching Danae and I kept listening to Danae, and finally I started looking into the Enneagram, and of course then I start telling her how amazing it is, right? And then she said, "Oh, that's good.
That's a good
Exactly.
one.
Oh, way to go, Doug." So I will say kudos to you as well for the fact when we talk about modeling, that you have modeled many things that I have later picked up on, and that's what it's all about for all of us.
Thank you. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Questions? You want to take questions in? Quick question?
If anybody has a question.
Yes.
What's been probably the most challenging thing you've done since you've been consulting with these two models?
I would say the most challenging in my world from worldviews, it's a real toss-up between politics and religion.
Two little subjects that don't matter. Nobody talks about them.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've been involved, for example, we've had people to our house that do consulting in the Middle East with the Palestinians and the Israelis, and it really makes me feel a whole lot better about teenagers. It's like, oh, okay, all right, so other people do this too. And then, of course, in the religion spirituality field, look, this idea of Clare Graves, one of his core statements was, everyone has a right to be who they are, damn it. That's his quote. That's his quote. Well, so on the one hand, I respect people's rights to say, this is what my religious spiritual views are. And on the other hand, I know that I have specific views too, in terms of whatever you want to call it, a higher power or God or many other names that people use. And so when you're having those conversations, especially with spiritual leaders, look, they really are struggling because the fastest growing segment in spirituality in the United States today is that group called spiritual but not religious. If you're familiar with that term, the SBNRs, spiritual but not religious, non-affiliated, that's growing faster than any religion or denomination or what have you, and buildings are emptying. There are some traditional pastors who are going into a building that seats 500 people, and there's about 75 that meet right in the middle that are still trying to hold to those traditional belief systems, and they're trying to figure out, how do we survive? What should we be doing? So I would say those two things for me. Now, from an Enneagram perspective, I mean, I don't know if you'd say there's any...
Oh, it's basically what I said. It's the things that I've learned all through the different tools that I've come across with, and my desire to help everybody get healthy and know exactly what is good for your life. For me, that has been my journey, and I'm going to give this quick little example. It'll just take a second. We want so bad to help our children be at peace with their lives and not have to struggle. And we want to spare them, the hardships that maybe we went through. And I'm sure many of you have heard this example, but it's one of my favorites, so I'm going to say it. So it's the butterfly in the cocoon, right? So the little boy is seeing, oh, the butterfly, he's trying to break out of that cocoon, and he's on the ground, and he's just struggling, and part of the cocoon is opening, but he's still just twisting and twisting. So the little boy just says, I'm just going to help him out, and I'm just going to pop that cocoon open so I can set him free. And isn't that what we all have in our heart, is that we want to set people free? But what happens with that butterfly is so amazing. Science, nature is just so awesome. What happens is that butterfly absolutely has to struggle. The pushing in the cocoon forces blood to the end of their wings. And that struggling is what sets them free to fly. When we go in and want so bad to help spare our children the journey of going through the pain and suffering, which we have decided is bad. That's the question. Is it? Is it really bad, or is it for their growth? So for me, that's my challenge. It's a personal challenge, just to step back and go, this is my journey, and this is your journey. That's it for me.
And when the kids were teens, we had teens in the house, we used to quote the great philosopher's 38 special.
Yeah.
Hold on loosely, but don't let go. Hold on loosely, but don't let go. Another one I like is by a group that you probably have read if you're into consciousness studies, and that's Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick writes a song that says, Mama's all right, Daddy's all right, they just seem a little weird. Surrender, but don't give yourself away. So there's all these philosophical. You see how deep we go with this content? I mean,
You're going to listen to all the songs.
That's right. That's why we use classic.
Okay. Any more
rock.
questions? Because
Yeah.
you guys have sat in that chair for a long time.
Yes.
So we talked about the different ways that the Enneagram types want love or show their love. And how we talk about how it can be unhealthy and healthy in that, so the evolution of that. So Doug, in the spiral dynamics, the evolution of the worldview,
Yes.
how does your worldview, how does your view of love
Yes.
manifest in each one of those levels?
Great question. So, for example, in the religious world, the people that are more traditional in the religious world, and that's their belief that I respect fully. This is not to tell anybody what they should believe or what they shouldn't believe or what their lens should be or what their number should be, right? But within the traditional world, the concern about God's love is that there's a certain response that's needed in order for you to be accepted versus rejected. In other words, they're sheep and goats in traditional love. And so you want to be on the side of the sheep so that you remain in God's love. As you move forward into modernity and then post-modernity, what you're finding is that the things that the more traditional, tightly held boundaries are in the traditional, they're expanding. So for example, we're working with the big, like I said, LGBTQ. In the traditional, that is something that is absolutely wrong, and you need to find some way to correct it, or you're not going to be a part of God's love. In the postmodern age, the progressives, if you will, they call themselves progressives. The traditional would call them heretics. The progressives are saying, look, we think all human beings are worthy of love, and we do not see a difference on the basis of gender. As far as we're concerned, that we read the same book they read, and we read things in that book like there's neither male nor female. So if there's neither male nor female, that's telling me that identity is beyond gender. Those kinds of conversations. And so as a progressive, you're saying from a world-centric view, there aren't races and ethnicities and genders and sexual orientations with regard to identity. All of those things are biological functions or roles. And you can agree or disagree with that role or function from a moral, ethical, or value standpoint if you'd like. It's everybody's right to do that. But the question is, does your view restrict who gets the love and who doesn't? Does that make any sense? Okay.
And we had talked about this. I'm not going to go through all the levels, but I'm going to give you just a short example of if you grew up in a very traditional age, there were standards that needed to be upheld. So within regards to parenting, the way I showed love was to uphold the standards of the group, and that might mean that I needed to beat my child and maybe say something like, well, this hurts me more than it hurts you. And
spare the rod, spoil the child.
Right. And so that truly was showing love. It was when Doug talked about the father and the son, that, the pastor split thing. He's showing his love by rejecting his son. So when you move up in your view of how humanity and the human value and what really is love, you begin to question, well, in regards to children, do we really need to beat them? Or is there another way? Can we discipline children? Can we uphold good boundaries, healthy boundaries, and not resort to physical violence? That's just a little thing. I don't want to go through all the levels. I did have examples for all the level, in parenting.
There's
but
so much
you
more,
can-
we could have done there.
You can
Yeah.
see, if you're on any of the parenting sites, that's a conversation of how to discipline, how to parent, how to show love, and stay within those healthy boundaries. So,
And we sat on the sofa at our place talking to two people that came down to visit us from New York State, both of whom were therapists.
oh yeah,
They had traditional worldviews, but they were in therapy all day long with people. And they held traditional values. And they thought they knew what they believed regarding LGBTQ until their daughter came to them and said, I'm a lesbian. And they sat there as therapists talking to us in terms of questioning, oh my God, but she's my daughter. Remember I said about the unworkable? Sometimes you encounter things in life that are unworkable, it doesn't add up, and you're looking at it a different way, and suddenly the people that you're writing off are actually real in your own darn life, and that becomes an unworkable situation. There are other people that say, well, whatever God wants me to do, I'll do that, including if I need to reject them or separate myself from them, and those are worldviews that have to do with whether I'm in the law, a boundary-driven traditional, or whether I'm in another. And again, we use the term evolution. If you have a more traditional view here, that may indicate that the view of postmodernity is better or greater than the view of traditional. We're not trying to say that, because when I was in traditional, I would have said that's regression. You have left the truth. So those are the conversations, though, that have to be had.
I know. And
Those are just the conversations that have
we
to be had.
Got to wrap it up here. I do want to say that on your handout, you'll see, if you just read the descriptions where you go up into yellow and turquoise, that's a next level leap into what we call integral. And at that point, we are loving and accepting of all humans. And that's just
Even with whom we disagree.
thank you. Safe drives home.
Thank you. Yeah, right.
Okay, we are done with this series. Thank you all so much for the kind feedback that I've received, which I truly value. If you have any questions, please let me know, and Doug and I will do our best to address them in future episodes. In the meantime, I hope you are enjoying the extra hours of sunshine as we enter spring and all the energy that it brings. I also hope that you get to experience and know the joy of who you are by loving your own number. Talk soon.